Say forewarned is forearmed. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. As we speak, elections officials across this country are wargaming scenarios, strategizing responses to any and every move Donald Trump might make come Election Day, expected and unexpected, from disruption to cataclysm. The latest reporting from our MS Now colleagues, quote, 5 top election officials in different states told MS Now that state officials and election administrators are in active conversations with local law enforcement, state attorneys general, and legal advisors about how to respond if federal agents attempt to raid a polling site and seize ballots or machines, breaking the chain of custody for ballots and potentially throwing an election's results into doubt. If federal agents arrive at a polling location with a search warrant in hand, a state's only apparent immediate response is to sue and seek an emergency stay from a court. If federal agents try to seize ballots or disrupt voting based on a national emergency declared by the president, state officials are actively talking to local law enforcement about their options to respond, said election officials. But it does not stop there. Multiple sources who spoke with MS Now insist the trust and relationship between state and federal officials is right now at an all-time low. Remember, CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, used to be an essential federal partner for states in protecting against foreign interference and attacks on essential election systems. That is, before the Trump administration all but set a match to it. Now, what's left of the agency is hastily seeking to rebuild bridges with state officials in an effort sources described as too little, too late. Just this week, VoteBeat reports frustrations boiled over during a rare election security call between CISA and state officials. Quote, after more than a year of near silence, elections officials wondered if CISA would step up to offer classified intelligence briefings on emerging cyber threats from hostile countries, specialized testing of election equipment, or training on how to prepare for potential problems on Election Day. Instead, CISA leaders provided what one participant characterized as a generic CYA, cover your butt, briefing that offered state officials few assurances that the federal government would help thwart threats this November. CISA did not respond to VoteBeat's request for comment. But that relationship, or lack thereof, one senior election official told MS Now, quote, the trust has been so decimated. The threats we're getting are coming from within the government now.
Shared an unsigned Census Bureau report claiming more than 24,000 non-citizens voted in the 2020 election. A figure, by the way, that even if true would not have changed the outcome of that election. But one Trump did try to claim would soon explode. The number would explode once the analysis was finished. It would be even bigger. Except the ones doing the analysis are not career census staffers. They are apparent Trump allies. One official told NPR the team behind it included people affiliated with the America First Policy Institute, a think tank founded by former Trump officials. It follows reporting from CNN citing 3 former census officials that said the administration had installed a group of analysts from that think tank inside the Bureau earlier this year. Spokespeople for the Bureau, the America First Policy and Institute, and the White House did not respond to NPR's request for comment. Outside election experts, though, like the executive director of the Center for Election Innovation and Research, told NPR, quote, the analysis is laughable. Census data cannot reliably be matched to voter data. And former Census Bureau Director Rob Santos called the report a hijack by the White House, telling CNN he was shocked and dismayed to see it on the Bureau's website. The question is, what will they try to do with those claims in places where Republicans lose in November?
All of that analysis in mind, I want you to take a listen to Steve Bannon. This is sound from this week, him talking about ICE at polling places.
This is why we need a national emergency proclamation, a national emergency memo about the upcoming elections. You're going to have a forcing function to get to ID. You're going to have a forcing function not to have the phony mail-in ballots. You're going to have forcing function, Jack Posobiec, to have a up-armored ICE presence at these polling booths. And they say, well, that's going to be intimidation. Well, it ain't intimidation if you're a United States citizen. It's an intimidation if you're a foreigner and here illegally and not eligible to vote. It should be intimidating.
You know, I reported from New Jersey during this past election, and I spoke to a lot of local organizers who organize in Latino communities where they're trying to get U.S. citizens out to vote. And one of the things they heard is simply the presence of ICE agents in the street had a chilling effect on voters, even if they were U.S. citizens who had every right to vote. So that's bananas. Explain to me what a national emergency memo is going to look like.
It's going to be disinformation put in the form of a memo that claims that something is happening that is not happening. But I just want to make this one thing very clear. Mm-hmm. First of all, they know exactly what Ari is exactly right. Steve Bannon is saying these things to scare people from even showing up. And what people need to understand is, no, you have every right to vote because you are a citizen. That's why you're registered. The states handle the registration. They do a good job. And at the same time, people need to understand that it is a violation of federal law for ICE to show up at those polling sites and stand there. It is a violation. And there are clergy, multi-denominational organizations.
So if you are in your neighborhood and all of a sudden ICE shows up at your poll, who do you call to say, I am seeing a violation of my civil liberties?
Well, first of all, you call your election administrators. I mean, remember, the states are the ones that administer. You have Laura's reporting is exactly right when secretaries of state are figuring out how to ensure that they're not getting federal interference in their administration of elections. They're going to be lawyers on call and ready for exactly this kind of thing because they keep telling us they're going to do it. And so the point is, we've got folks that are going to be poll watching, poll observing. When I'm talking about clergy, we see and are watching faith leaders. I participate in some of the trainings myself to ensure that we have folks who are at the polls ensuring that they can make the call into the appropriate state authorities if they're seeing something unlawful that they believe is happening. And it's exactly why state authorities are talking to their own law enforcement about how do we handle it if our laws are being violated. I think this is the point that voters should know and understand. It's both faith leaders and church leaders, it's unions, it's organizations, civil rights organizations, making sure people are protected and know their rights, but it's also the election officials themselves that are being prepared for this. And it is a violation of federal law. Ask yourself why. Why is it a violation? Why? So it's a violation because everybody understands that you don't want the federal government trying to control elections. You just want states to be able to administer it in a nonpartisan way. That is what is going to happen here. But if by chance we see that kind of vote, look, don't call it voter suppression. I call it blocking voters from voting. Let's make it plain. This is about scaring people off from the polls, even though that it's their right to show up and vote, or trying to intimidate them by suggesting that they shouldn't be there. And what we're going to make sure happens is that their civil rights are protected. But all of this is doing is energizing a lot of people to get engaged and make sure that we the people continue to be we the people and have a say over deciding who leads us.
Some steps it says President Trump has taken toward undermining American democracy. Measuring on a scale from 0 to 10, with 0 representing a strong, though imperfect democracy, and 10 representing a true autocracy, the board has moved one category, at least, manipulating the law to stay in power, up to level 3. The Times editorial board explains Trump has pushed Republican-led states to redraw congressional maps, has backed legislation that could restrict voting, and raise questions about whether legitimate ballots could be rejected. Constitutional scholars and democracy experts tell the Times they worry about possible voter intimidation and efforts to block certification of election results, adding Trump's gerrymandering campaign has likely shifted the House competition at least 2.5 percentage points toward Republicans. With the president already taking steps like this for the midterm elections, the Times warns if Trump succeeds in perverting the results, as they write, he could be emboldened to take similar steps in 2028.
Let's just say I'm looking at it with extreme skepticism. I mean, look, when we're talking about non-citizens voting, this should be an easy issue to talk about because, number one, if non-citizens are on the voter rolls, they should not be there. We should remove non-citizens from the voter rolls. However, the problem of non-citizen voting is microscopic. It has not been documented in any rigorous way to matter at all. Instead, it's a rounding error on a rounding error on a rounding error. And a lot of the emphasis on it, quite frankly, is still related all the way back to this 2020 obsession, where the Trump world is still looking for something, anything that they can find to say that the 2020 election was illegitimate. So we should be concerned if non-citizens pop up on voter rolls. They should be removed. But Americans need to know that in the scheme of American elections, the problem of non-citizen voting is not even close to material. It is not even anything. It is not something that people should worry about when they go to the polls. This is an effort to try to generate fear. It is not an effort to address a real and truly substantial problem.
So you scream about a problem that doesn't exist. And in this case, there are illegal aliens living in the United States, but there's almost no evidence anywhere in any state of them actually voting. Because if you think about it, if you were illegal, why would you even try to vote? And for all kinds of reasons, the states all have systems where they can check people's citizenship. It's just not true. But they're trying to create this boogeyman, illegals are voting, so that if they lose an election in Georgia or if they lose an election in North Carolina, they can say, oh, it's because of the illegals voting, and maybe they'll try to seize voting machines or reverse the results. They've already done. They've already seized voting machines in Georgia and Fulton County in a kind of fake attempt to relitigate the 2020 election. But you're right. It's distracting people with a fake threat. Here is a threat you need to be worried about. And of course, if millions of illegal citizens were voting, we should be worried. But it's not true. But they repeat it as if it were true. And again, this is exactly what Viktor Orban did. You're right, and not only him. And then you have the consequences, which is that they are then able to challenge the system itself.
19 months into the second Trump administration, and they're still blaming Joe Biden. And first of all, war on cows? Really? You're going to blame a war on cows for the fact that tariff policies and all the other horrific policies that are being put in place continue to cause groceries, make groceries spike, continue to make rent spike? Willie, just on the last issue about debt and on deficits, I actually do know something about this. I don't know if I told you. I was in Congress. We balanced the budget 4 years in a row, the only Congress that have done that in 100 years. Let me just tell you, Donald Trump, in his first term, before Joe Biden was president, before Joe Biden stepped into the Oval Office, he oversaw deficits spiking a record number, 317%. Deficits went up from the beginning of his term to the end of his term, 317%. That increase from Obama. In the second term, already in his first year, CBO is projecting it's going to at least be a 20% increase so far this year. During Biden's final year, deficits were actually going down. Now, once again, they're going up. So there are three things they cannot deny, Willie. Number one, under Donald Trump, term one and term two, we've had the largest deficits in the history of America. In fact, Donald Trump has accounted for $1 out of every $3 in our federal debt. Think about that. He's president 45 and 47. Well, yeah, he has been responsible for 1/3 of our federal debt. The other 44 presidents will take the 2/3. Secondly, we have the highest deficits ever. That's based on his choices. His choices for tax cuts for the rich, his choices for making the Pentagon spending go up to record levels, his choice to start an unnecessary war that is costing us billions and billions of dollars, and his choice to actually put out the biggest, most pork barrel budget of all time. This is on him, not cows. It's on him, and the numbers show it clearly. And I think the American people are smart enough, Willie, to understand that.
It's Friday, 21 August, in the year of our Lord, 2026. I think we've got a lot to go through today, and we're going to get to it as soon as we take a short commercial break. You're in the War Room on a Friday in August.
Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back. It's Friday, 21 August, year of our Lord, 2026. Magnificent cold open right there. Boy, they're not too afraid of foreign nationals illegally on voting rolls or illegal aliens voting, are they? Maya Wiley, who's one of the smartest commentators, she ran for mayor of New York, a far left radical, but quite smart. I mean, she nails right there. Oh, Steve Bannon's trying to intimidate people. Maya, if you're a United States citizen, you have Cortes, come and help me out here. Maya and Menendez, and by the way, as I told you, Menendez is going to be a superstar over there. She's going to be their new star along with Stephanie Rule. We called that years ago. Maya Wiley, Steve Bannon is trying to intimidate. But no, I'm not, Maya. But we are trying to intimidate foreign nationals are not supposed to vote in illegal aliens. You damn right. Not just intimidate them, arrest them, roll them up and arrest them. And we're not going to back off that, ma'am. Sorry, Amen. Not sorry. Cortes, why are they so panicked about that, sir?
Well, they're panicked because they know that in substantial numbers, foreigners are voting. And by the way, it's not just the illegals, it's how many legal foreigners are in this country, tens of millions of them legally here. Okay, they are allowed to be here. I think there's too many of them, but that's a different topic. The point is, in survey after survey, 10% of them tell us that they are voting. And in most states, because these folks have driver's licenses, they're allowed to get driver's licenses, okay? These are foreign nationals who are allowed to be here. But when they get driver's licenses in most states, they are automatically registered to vote. So for some of them, by the way, some of them may not even have sinister intent. They may just think, well, I got registered to vote, I'm voting, right? I mean, it might be a natural human reaction. The point is, none of them are allowed to vote. Obviously not the illegals, but not even the millions and millions of legal foreigners who are in this country. And we know they are voting in substantial numbers and in tight elections, and we've now had 3 extremely tight presidential elections in a row, right, in the swing states. In those states, it can absolutely be determinative, and probably is determinative, that these foreigners are voting. So we're not making this up. This isn't some tinfoil hat garbage. This is reality. And here's the point too, Steve. In so many of these blue states, right, where they control, or even if they're swing states, but where they're in control for right now, like Wisconsin, I think Republicans are going to get control. But the point is, the Democrats have controlled these blue states for the last 3 election cycles. And in cities like Milwaukee, where there is no transparency, right, where they operate in darkness regarding their voter rolls, where they will not make them public, where they fight every attempt at transparency, we know that there is systemic cheating going on of various kinds. And one of the elements of the cheat clearly is encouraging and facilitating the vote of foreigners.
I want everybody to get their number 2 pencil out. We got another concept. We're going to talk about concepts today. Fiscal consolidation, financial repression. We're going to go back over this. Remember, it's wash, rinse, repeat. Systemic cheating. Walk me through that for a second, because that is the absolute key concept and back of this national security emergency. And Peter Tickton, who's one of the co-architects of this with Wayne Allen Root, is going to be on the show in the second hour with a specific example of what's happening in the country right now. He's going to talk about the National Security Emergency Memo. Systemic cheating. You're saying it's just not onesies, twosies, people like, oh, I didn't know, these foreign, but first off, we should have a moratorium on this quote unquote legal immigration, because all a scam, starting with the H-1B visas, all a scam. But they know they're not supposed to vote, but they're getting signed up by DMV, and they're coming out in droves to vote, and they're going to come out in more droves to vote because they understand our program is to get rid of these phony programs and get them the hell out of the country. Steve Cortes.
Yes, and so many of them, Steve, why are they voting? Even if they know they shouldn't be, because they're getting benefits from being in the United States, and they know those benefits will only continue and will only be lavish and increase if Democrats win elections. I think a lot of Americans don't really realize that. You know, I know we're going to talk about the bond market and the stress on our budget. A big element of that anxiety and that crisis for this country is because we are lavishing so many benefits upon foreigners, both legals and illegals. And many of them, people will be shocked by this, believe it or not, by state statute at least, they are entitled to those benefits in places like California, where they get taxpayer-funded health care. So you want to know one of the reasons why your grandma might not be able to get the care that she deserves under Medicare and Medicaid? Well, part of it is because the illegals and the foreigners who are here legally are taking so many of those benefits. So are they voting their own interests? Of course they are. And in terms of the systemic nature of the cheat, Steve, I think this is important. The reason we know it is not just that we know it intuitively. It's because if we look at these statistics and the data, it reveals itself. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, if you look at, I mentioned Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee is the worst and most consequential cheating center for elections in this country. It's one big reason we need to elect Tom Tiffany governor there so that he can clean it up. But when we look at the precinct level data, for example, in Milwaukee, the turnout models, the turnout results in very Democrat-leaning districts in Milwaukee, which is most of them, they are absurd. They defy belief, right? They're just simply not plausible turnout percentages in these areas. You see similar things in Atlanta, similar things in Philadelphia, but I think, again, Milwaukee's the worst. So we know empirically, we know from a data-driven approach that there is systemic cheating going on. And again, foreigners are part of that. It's not the only part of the cheat, but it's part of it. And I personally believe that Wisconsin will always be a close state. But if we have a clean election and we only actually count valid ballots in the state of Wisconsin, I believe Republicans are going to win there in this November. I think they're going to win there in 28 and probably win then thereafter once we do the census the right way, which again is another important topic. Once we do the census the right way, then we win for decades to come.
This is why they fight so hard, the Save America Act. Now we're beyond the Save America Act. It's too late. Okay, we got to stop. And I realize they're doing messaging that the Democrats are for. That's all fine, but not that any Democratic voters or even moderates care about that. In Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, Georgia, just to name a couple of three places that maybe we have contested elections. If you cleaned up the voter roll, this is why they're so adamant about it. They're not going to touch the voter roll. What are you talking about? Their business model is based upon illegal alien invaders and the phony immigration programs. Get them on here on welfare benefits. You're taking care of them. You sign them up. You intimidate the Republican Party. Oh, you're racist and nativist. You can't come into the polls and check this out. Screw you. We're sending up armor ICE to the polls. And if people are intimidated, they're intimidated because they're not eligible to vote. And they understand when they get rolled up, they're going to go to prison and kicked out of the country, which is a twofer. Yeah. Cortes, is that not the fact? The business model of the Democrats, and I'm going to segue after your answer into now they're all sitting there, oh my gosh, we have debt and deficits. But let's go back to this. Their business model is centered on illegal alien invaders and these phony foreign nationals that are here voting in elections for their own benefit, sir.
Yes, 100%. To have as large a group of people who are dependent on government largesse, who will then politically support you so that you can continue to consolidate power, that is the model of the Democrat Party, both at the local level and at the national level in this country. And even legal immigrants, to this point, Steve, believe it or not, the Los Angeles Times, not exactly a right-wing publication, it was actually willing to admit that in Los Angeles County, largest county in America, immigrant-headed households, 55% of them getting government benefits, getting means-tested government benefits, which is really another way of saying welfare. The majority of immigrant-headed households. Okay, that means we are not doing legal immigration right. Illegal immigration, of course, should be practically impossible. It's a scourge on this nation. But even legal immigration, we are not applying the kinds of filters and rules to legally immigrate to this country to guarantee that we are truly getting ambitious, go-getter, America-loving legal migrants, and it's putting massive strain on our budgets. It's one of the reasons, not the only reason, but it's a key driver of why we have these unsustainable deficits. So it's wrong for our elections, it's wrong for the sanctity of our elections, but it's also just totally fiscally profligate to continue to follow these policies. But you're exactly correct. It is clearly the business model of the Democrat Party. Now, having said all that, I think we're about to break that model in 28, 30, 32. But boy, we better work our tails off.
No, you got to get to the census, and you got to, but so many things have to happen right. Let's pull back for a second. I want to connect this because they're saying on Morning Joe, well, nobody's ever connected, and Axios, nobody's ever connected spending, this massive deficits and massive financing of these deficits to their own personal life. Well, that's not the War Room posse. For years, we've been talking about the 10-year Treasury and about how that governs so much of your financial life. And it's all tied to the refinancing of the federal debt. Yesterday, Steve, I only got about 2 minutes here. I'm going to hold you through the break. The Guardian newspaper, which is very well edited and very, very well written, but it is the paper of record of the far left in the world, and particularly the United States. They had their bold headline at the top was breaking news. U.S. debt crosses $40 trillion. Then in quotes, Democrats outraged. Democrats outraged. You can see on Morning Joe, they spent half the show this morning tying it to Bessent and to President Trump, the debt and deficits. When you talk to any of their candidates, they are literally out of control on benefits, on Medicare for all. On it, they want $3 and $4 trillion deficits a year, sir.
Right. Yeah. So listen, and here's the proof that that's absurd, of course, is look at the actual numbers, right? I don't have to give you my opinion. I traded bonds for 25 years. Price is truth when it comes to capital markets, and there's no capital market more important in the world than the U.S. Treasury bond market. And if we look at treasuries in the fall of 2019, which you and I talk about often, Steve, was really, it was the greatest year and the greatest period of the greatest year for American workers in all of U.S. history, because we had real wages galloping higher because pay was increasing and inflation was incredibly restrained. Deficits were heading in the right direction as a percentage of GDP. The 10-year yield, which is really the barometer, okay, it's what global capital thinks about inflationary pressures within the United States relative to growth. Right now, we're at 4.7%, which I think is quite alarming, getting up near 5 at the 10-year Treasury yield. In the fall of 2019, Steve, we were below 2. We were hanging around 2 and getting below 2%, so less than half of current yields. That shows you that the America First Trump model can work, did work, can work again, but we've really got to put our shoulder to the wheel, as you always say, to make that happen again.
Yeah. Hang on one second. We're going to take a short commercial break. Cortes, McCabe's going to join us from the White House. We're going to roll this morning on a Friday in August in the War Room.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, folks, we're going to connect a lot of dots here right now. So I want everybody sit down and take a lead story in, I think I put this up on Getter, but the lead story in Axios this morning is America's capital crunch. Soaring debt collides with AI spending spree. Okay? America's capital crunch, soaring debt collides with AI spending spree. I'm going to send this to my producer right now, but I think I've already got this up on Getter, because what I said is the theory of the case here at the War Room has been for a while. In fact, if you read this, you go, gosh, I heard this with Bannon was talking about this for the last 6 months or so. What we have in this country right now, and this is why it's so dangerous, because let's have an adult partners discussion, not the crap you hear on MSNBC and all this. Oh, it's all Trump's fault. It's Trump's fault. We have right now, this is the business model of the United States, both the government and and also corporate. We have a highly leveraged bet on a leverage bet that we're going to have massive artificial intelligence productivity increases, okay, without the concomitant mass layoffs in STEM workers. Write that down. I've said this now for months and months and months, and now Axios kind of backs it up. We have a highly leveraged bet on a leverage bet on artificial intelligence, on massive artificial intelligence productivity increases without the concomitant mass layoffs among STEM workers. When Scott Bessent says yesterday, and then JD kind of repeated it on Newsmax, but people have to understand this. Particularly, you got to understand when you start talking about growth, you have to understand what Bessent's talking about, that we're going to grow our way out of this emergency. Because Bessent's theory of the case is you attack an emergency to avoid a crisis. You attack an emergency to avoid a crisis. So what he's saying, this is part of the big, beautiful bill, that you incentivize capital to kind of invest in high value added manufacturing jobs to bring back to the United States. And both tariffs are a forcing function. The tax, the supply side tax cut is a kind of a forcing function to force jobs back here. and that investment is happening. We had Peter Navarro on the other day. We've had Scott Besson on a couple of weeks ago to talk about it. So Cortes, that's happening. However, the overwhelming majority of what is happening is that we're at 40 trillion in debt, and the 40 trillion debt's bad enough. But worse is the deficits that we have that are unsustainable. And we said it last year when they came out on September 30th of last year and October 1st and said, well, hey, the deficit, we're going to get it under control. Deficit's going to be $1 trillion or less. We said, no. If you just look at the structural issues we have, and this is without the war, this is without paying for the excursion into the Middle East, you're going to be at about $2 trillion. And that $2 trillion is kind of ongoing. And this is why it's, I don't know, it's $1 trillion every couple of months, every 90 days, 4 months, 5 months. It took us 200 years to get to the first trillion. We've added 37 trillion since 9/11, and we continue now at a $2 trillion clip. That has to be financed, and 1/3 of the debt, because basically Biden, these guys went short term, has to be refinanced all the time. Going into the capital markets and getting that, particularly when foreigners are saying, "Hey, you know what? I may have enough dollars right now." You ever read End of the Dollar Empire? This is where King Dollar, everybody needed King Dollar, but the BRICS nations and other nations, some of whom are actually allies of the United States, not just our enemies, are sitting there going, hey, guys, no offense. The reason the Lakers are $12 billion, the reason the Queen Music Library is over $1 billion, not simply the intrinsic value of those libraries, but also the devaluation of dollar, the drop in purchasing power, which, as the guys over at Brownstone showed, has really been 50% since Biden took office. This is all inextricably linked into an emergency right now that has to be addressed. But, Steve Cortes, we have $40 trillion in debt. We have $2 trillion deficits as far as the ICC, because the Senate just passed a CR to kick the can down the road to December, which is going to be another omnibus on Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi's spending levels. We're not even getting close to getting to the spending levels back pre-COVID. We're still dealing with that. And on top of that, you have the AI companies, and they kind of gave us a hint of this. Yes, it's going to be a lot of equity capital involved, but at the end of the day, in fact, the OpenAI CFO got fired because she said the quiet part out loud over a year ago. She said, we're going to need government support and government guarantees on a couple of $1 trillion of debt as we hyperscale into what? Oh, wait for it. Data centers. And data centers, I can tell you right now, the reason Husted's down in besides the fact he's a stiff and people in Ohio can't pick him out of a police lineup, is data centers. The reason I think Mike Rogers is, data centers in Michigan is going to be huge. The great Tom Tiffany, the reason he's competitive is data centers, the issue in Wisconsin. Data centers are the issue all over the country. In fact, you just had Abbott, who was king data center, said last week, you know what, we're going to have a moratorium for a while. We got to study this. We really got to review it, because right now that governor's race, unbelievably, is competitive. Why? Wait for it. Data centers. The highly leveraged bet, Steve Cortes, is one of the most dangerous things the United States has ever done as a nation. Yeah. And trust me, so much has to go right to pull this off. And even if it's pulled off, only the oligarchs are going to make out. Steve Cortes, the floor is yours for your observations and analysis.
Yeah, Steve, you're exactly correct that right now, I think in some ways, things are almost as precarious as they were heading into the housing crisis, the great financial crisis. And the reason I say that is because you're right, this massive national bet on AI data centers and this binge of debt there is stacked on top of an existing unsustainable national debt at the federal government level because of the COVID panic and the ensuing inability, unwillingness to grapple with our level of spending, our profligacy. And the reality is capital crowd out is a real thing. What do I mean by that? It means that look, the capital markets, particularly the debt capital markets, they are the engine, they are the fuel, the lubricant of the economy. That's the way the American economy has always grown, is we've had such vibrant, fantastic capital markets, especially on the debt side. And right now, with the interest rates rising like this, those markets are starting to get crowded out, meaning because the hyperscalers are so massive and because the government is so massive at borrowing, there's almost no money left, even for worthy borrowers. Hence, what do we have? We have people who already have lots of capital, who don't necessarily need to borrow that much, doing better and better while regular Americans continue to fall further and further behind. I'm glad you mentioned the sports leagues, because I think that's actually a great example. Even if you don't care about sports at all, the point is, what do the sports leagues have? What does the NBA have in every league? It's a very scarce supply, right? A limited, finite, in fact, finite supply of teams that are generally considered to be very valuable. Why did the Lakers sell for $12 billion, which, by the way, put $2 billion in the pocket of the prior owner for a year? Okay, he only owned the team for 1 year, pocketed $2 billion, a generational level of wealth that's unimaginable to most people. But were the new buyers dumb? Probably not in this inflationary environment. Let me give you some other prices that I think will reflect what I'm talking about. Why you think, for example, why do you think your trip to the grocery store is so expensive? Well, one of the reasons is, let's look at farmland. We just got USDA reports out. Farmland right now, if you look at cropland, so actual crop buying land, $6,020 per acre. That is the first time it has ever gone above $6,000 an acre. It's been going up, by the way, now for 5 years in a row, all during the COVID panic, up 44% overall farmland is since the COVID panic. Overall farmland, $4,500 an acre. That's not just cropland. That includes pasture land, which is less valuable, but over $6,000 an acre for the first time ever. At the same time, we've got gold right now above $4,600 an ounce, silver right around $70 an ounce, Bitcoin right around $77,000, 10-year yield at 4.71. So these are the tangible kitchen table realities that regular Americans have to face. And if you don't own a lot of financial assets, you are not benefiting. You are only being hurt by these increases in prices. And to bring this back to the hyperscalers and the data center and the amount of debt that they're piling on right now, what I think a lot of Americans may not realize is they hear, Meta and Anthropic and all these companies, they think, well, these are giants. They can sort of afford this. No, they don't have this kind of cash at this level of investment. They are borrowing this money. And whether you know it or not, they are effectively borrowing it in your name, because just as Wall Street was doing the same thing with mortgages in 08, 09, 07, 08, right now, Silicon Valley is doing it on the hyperscaler bet. And it's in your name, whether you know it or not. And people seem to be waking up to this reality, Steve. I'll give you a sneak peek. I've got a new poll coming out in Wisconsin. It's not yet public. Daily Signal will be putting it out as soon as today. Might be any minute, as a matter of fact, released. But I polled on hyperscalers, and I had polled on data centers there last year. And I was actually surprised how positive people were a year ago in Wisconsin about data centers. I was already starting to turn very skeptical. But when I polled it, and this is one of the reasons we poll, is right, sometimes our assumptions are wrong, even those of us who think we're really astute about where people are. But a year ago, Wisconsinites were quite positive on data centers. Approval today in the poll that I'm about to release, 15%. 15% approval for data centers among the good patriots in Wisconsin. And that's overall, by the way. Among folks of lower income, single-digit percentage. Even among Trump voters, Steve, and the White House keeps touting data centers, which I think is a mistake. But even among Trump voters in Wisconsin, only 20% approval for data centers in the Badger State right now. It's a collapse. Support for data centers has collapsed. And it's not just because these data centers have been abusive.
It's a proxy.
Yeah, correct.
It's a proxy also on the tech oligarchs. It's a proxy. They're fed up with this. They're fed up with Zuckerberg. They're fed up with Elon. They're fed up with all this crap. They're all bringing in H-1B visa holders. They're destroying this new generation. The data centers are, and the way they've done it, with the tactics they've done it, and it's here's the bottom line. It's a stone cold loser. You can make all kind of arguments theoretically. It don't matter. You're 70 some days away from a midterm election. Data centers, because this is putting AI on the ballot. As I told people, this is going to be a campaign issue. Oh no, it's not. In Wisconsin, the Tom Tiffany race, which is all important as a governor's race, particularly for 28 and beyond. How much of that is going to be, as your polling shows, is going to be around data centers, sir?
Oh, huge. And because his opponent, David Crowley, who is the manager of Milwaukee, the president of Milwaukee County, has done a disastrous job in that role, of course. He has been as pro-data center as anybody could be. So Crowley, the Democrat nominee, has a lot of problems, but probably chief among them is his constant advocacy for data centers and his constant advocacy for tech in general. You're exactly right, Steve. The data center debate is turning into a much larger proxy fight, because those of us on the populist right, we're not against the idea of data centers. Of course we realize that we need them. Now, they need to be put in the right places, not in pristine, beautiful natural environments. You need to lavishly reward the local citizens for allowing them to go in there. The tech oligarchs need to show an ounce of humility for once, right? And realize that, hey, we have to make a deal with the American people. We can't just dictate our terms as we're used to doing in Silicon Valley. So we're not wholly anti-data center, but the point is, it has become a proxy where the American people are rendering a needed and justified verdict upon the oligarchs of big tech who have been so abusive to this country. They censored us like crazy, especially during the COVID panic. They have been systemically censoring right-wing speech for years and years. On top of that insult, they then, to your point, they then import masses of foreign workers via H-1B and other worker programs to replace Americans, to push Americans out of the workforce. And when you put all of those forces in totality, combined with their just incredible hubris, these are a lot of very unlikable, very cocky, arrogant figures, people like Mr. Wonderful, who show up on television and brag about wearing a $2 million watch and then tell us how we're going to live our lives and tell us that we're going to ruin pristine vistas in place like Utah. No, Mr. Wonderful, you can take your $2 million watch and shove it somewhere, okay? We have a say. This is our country. Tech is going to start hiring American workers. They're going to stop censoring people on the right. We are going to demand that we have accountability and that we have a piece of the pie regarding this massive bet that you are putting on in the American taxpayers' name.
Steve, hang on for 1 second. Short break.
Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Folks, here's what we're doing. We're talking Wisconsin now. Cortes got a big poll. The great Rob Bluey and the team over Daily Signal. It's not up yet. It's going to be up. And Cortes, I'm going to bug you for maybe coming back tomorrow or Monday. This poll's very important, okay, about what's happening in Wisconsin. Neil McCabe is going to be with us about Ohio. Okay, now we got a data center issue there, but also you've got the Haitians. McCabe's got an entire report on the Haitians in Ohio, which is issue. Also, we're going to go to Michigan and what's happening in Michigan. So we're kind of taking the all important Midwest today. The blue wall, right? The blue curtain that we pierced, and we must win. And Populist Nationalists should be winning there. Cortes, anything else on that? I'm going to have you back on, obviously, about the capital markets and Bessent's. Bessent's holding a press conference on Monday as scheduled about the economic war, what he's going to do on the economic war in Iran as he kind of takes charge. Also, in 2 weeks, they said that we're going to have basically a plan presented by former contributors Russ Vogt and Scott Bessent to the president of what's called fiscal consolidation. How do you read that? Because they said it's both going to be on the revenue side and the cost side. How do you read that, Cortes?
Well, listen, I'm very curious to see the details, but I know this, that if there are two guys who can do it, right, it's Scott Bessent and Russ Vogt who can try to thread the needle, because that's what's required right now, because they're obviously going to get zero assistance from the Capitol Hill side of things, including the Republicans. But the point is, one good thing about all these headlines about 40 trillion, even though obviously the legacy media is propagandizing about it, one good thing about these alarming headlines is I hope and expect that it is a wake-up call to regular Americans, and that they will connect that again to their reality, to wait a second, my trip to the grocery store is too expensive. Cortes tells me farmland $6,000, cropland is $6,000 an acre for the first time ever, and the deficit's at $40 trillion. Well, all of these levels are linked together, and they're making your life more difficult. Now, we have answers, and by the way, and one of the answers is that manufacturing finally is exploding. And that's great news in this country. And I think we need to talk a lot more about that.
In my credit card is more expensive. My mortgage is going up, all of it. But the answer, as we said at the beginning, was to make America a high value added manufacturing hegemon. Once again, these are the forcing functions of tariff. These are the forcing functions of the big beautiful bill, the supply side tax cut. We're seeing it manifested. We've had Navarro on here. We've had Bessent on here. Cortes, we got a clip about Hyundai. Let's go ahead and play that, and then you can talk about it.
Foreign companies rush to move manufacturing here to the United States. And this is a critical element of the broad but unfortunately quiet manufacturing boom that is unfolding all across the United States. The latest news, an exclusive interview at CNBC, the head of Hyundai, the Korean car maker, says they're going to massively increase their production in the state of Georgia. They're going from 500,000 vehicles per year to 800,000. They're investing a total of $26 billion in the United States. They also say that they're going to go to 80% of all cars that are sold here being made here versus only 40% before Trump took office in 2024. So doubling the percentage. Now, is this due to tariffs? Is it due to America First trade policy? Well, in their own words, this is the CEO, quote, "Tariffs accelerate our localization plan." That's very, very simple. It is simple. Trade tariffs work. If you want access to the crown jewel consumer market of the world, you need to pay a reasonable entry fee. One way to avoid it, make your products here. Spend your money in America on American workers, American plants, American real estate. That's what Hyundai is doing. It's what lots of big companies are doing. It's a huge America First trade win.
Let me duly note, South Korea is like a real ally. They fought with us in Vietnam. They've always been with us. Now they got a CCP-aligned government. We got to work on that. They got Ambassador Tan over there illegally in jail. We got to work on that. But they're an ally. Okay, you see it right there. And just repeat what the CEO said. This is, and you'll never see that on MSNBC or CNBC. Repeat what the CEO said.
Yeah, here, I have it precisely. Glad you asked. This is, quote, "Tariffs accelerate our localization plans." That's very, very simple. That is the CEO of Hyundai, a massive conglomerate Korean car maker. Tariffs accelerate our localization plans. So he put it as, and by the way, he's right. It is actually very, very simple. By the way, Korea, to their credit, is one of the most protectionist nations in the world. Okay, they protect their industries.
Yes.
Now that we are using some of their tactics, they're saying, ooh, we better increase our production in the United States. Massively so. What a huge win for the state of Georgia. I hope it helps Collins in that election there. What a win for the United States.
Yeah. By the way, and President Trump's right when he says, hey, the Koreans are very tough to get a trade deal with. They're hammers. They're tough folks, right? They've had a lot of tough experiences over the last couple of 100 years. They know, and they're going to protect their industries. But, go ahead.
To connect this back to the deficit issue, okay, here's the Steve Cortes plan, big picture. How can we actually make $40 trillion manageable? It's not easy, but I will tell you this. Two key components will be, number one, continued offshoring, right? The more we get high value manufacturing in this country, the better fiscal situation we end up in. Make them invest here, the forcing function. It's already working. It can accelerate from here. So that's number one. Number two, and they're related, right? They're both about protecting our homeland, our industries, our sovereignty. The second aspect, the more we get illegals out of this country, raises the pay of American citizens, reduces the massive stress on our budget because so many legal and illegal foreigners are getting our benefits. So to me, those are two critical elements to trying to get the debt to a manageable place. Continue the onshoring, so onshore the industries, offshore the illegals, and offshore even the legal workers via legal worker visas into this country. Those would be critical elements of getting control of our debt.
Okay. Where do people go for all the content, particularly the Wisconsin poll, all the films you're putting up, the Hyundai film? Where do they go for all of it?
Yeah, please go to CortesInvestigates.com, and you can also go to my social media. My Twitter is @CortesSteve, Cortes with an S at the end. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you taking this morning to be with us. We're going to talk about Ohio with Neil McCabe. We're going to go to Michigan. We've got one of the sheriffs up there. It's been on the show many times before to talk about this situation in Michigan. We're going to talk more about capital markets. Gold's at 46 today. It's not the daily price. It's the convergence of forces that drive the price and make gold a hedge against times of financial turbulence. You're in a fourth turning, folks. Of course it's going to be turbulence. Let's do it the easy way first. Take your phone out and text Bannon, B-A-N-N-O-N at 989898. You get the ultimate guide for investing in gold and precious metals in the age of Trump. They talk about all the tax-deferred ways of 401ks, IRAs, all of that. But you get access to Philip Patrick and his team, and you do it today. Short break. back for the second hour.